Hello, this is your host, Akal Navluri, and welcome to a brand new episode of the TechnoSpace podcast series. So, in this podcast episode, I'm very much honored and privileged to welcome a very special guest, Mr. Adam Parnell, who happens to be like 1 hour away from the time zone where I'm based in. So, if you get the guest right, I'm based in Melbourne and he's based in Brisbane, Queensland. Now, Mr. Adam Parnell, who goes by the LinkedIn profile name Adam Parnell, Mr. Adam Parnell, MEA, which is Masters of Enterprise Architect. And along with that, he happens to be the co-founder of Colloquial Solutions and the director of sales and product. And along with that, he dons the cap of being an enterprise architect and the business analyst at Queensland Rail. Now, giving a complete highlight about what Colloquial Solutions is. Colloquial Solutions is a startup company that's based in Sydney, Australia. So they go up with the motto, or let's say a key line, stating that they enable different companies to manage the portfolios of their capabilities, the process, the information, the apps and technology. Now, I'm sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you might be understanding what Queensland Rail is. So Queensland Rail is a railway company, or let's say a public sector company that's owned and operated by the government of Queensland, Australia. So, Adam, it gives me a huge pleasure and honor to welcome you to this podcast episode. So, how are you doing? And how's the footy scene in Brisbane at the moment? Because I know that Brisbane Lions are completely coming up to the fore of being the best. Now, how is the situation going on with them at the moment?
Well, yeah, nice to meet you, Akil. And that was it was a bit of a mouthful getting all that out, but yeah, no, it's nice to be on your podcast. Yes, the Brisbane Lions. While I live here and I reside in Brisbane, I'm a Collingwood supporter by heart. But yes, the Brisbane Lions are the current premiership holders. A lot of my friends up here like to remind me of that every time I talk to them. And yes, they're looking actually very strong for this year as well. So yeah. But yes, nice to be with you. And as you mentioned, I wear a couple of hats, both with my private company and also with my work at Queensland Rail. So yeah.
Awesome, Adam. So, Adam, so without further ado, let's kick off with the
Mm.
podcast segment.
Yeah. Cool.
So now, so Adam, as I've highlighted in the start, like you are the co-founder of Colloquial Solutions. Along with that, you're even the director of sales and product at Colloquial Solutions. Now, I just wanted to understand, like, what are the key initiatives that you have undertaken to oversee let's say the user-centric products that solve the real-world problems? Like, how do
Yeah.
you go about with that?
Yeah, good question. And I guess it's probably why we started Colloquial Solutions in the first place, right? So there was some needs that we saw in the marketplace, or some gaps in the marketplace in this sort of EA tool set, I guess you call it, or knowledge management repository. There's various words that get used when talking about the area that we're involved in. As far as it being user-centric, or that taking a user-centric approach to it, is definitely something that is core and primary to what we do. We not only as enterprise architects, but we also sort of follow a human-centered design approach, or a service design approach to things. So the customer is always at the forefront of our thoughts when we are looking to design features for Colloquial, the platform. So a user centricity approach, without a doubt. When I say we, I'm talking about my business partner Chris, and I have another business partner, Steve. He's kind of the brains of the development side of our business, but Chris, like myself, is a practicing architect. So we both practice from a consulting point of view through Colloquial Solutions, but we both are currently full-time enterprise architects, myself working at Queensland Rail, and Chris is working for an organisation in Sydney. So where possible, we are using the tool in our own EA practice. We also, through our consulting background, we both have a heavy consulting background, have quite a large network of enterprise architects. So we have called on our peer network and our friendship network across the globe. You know, we both worked in America and the UK and Europe and Australia, of course. And Chris is actually originally from New Zealand, so we have quite a lot of, I guess, a widespread network. And it was always part of our plan to try and get our peer network using the tool and giving us feedback as we develop. So user centricity has been at the core of everything that we've done to produce a product that is easy for architects to operationalize architecture. That's one of the gaps that we see in the market, is the tools that are out there are probably considered very difficult to use and have been designed by technical people for technical people. We kind of take a different mindset in that we have this kind of design for your grandmother, sort of which is kind of, if your grandmother can use the tool, then and it's no detriment to your grandmother. She might be a full stack developer who's quite good in this realm, but mostly unlikely. But we take that principle that if your grandmother can use it, then pretty much anyone else can, and certainly enterprise architects or architects generally can. So yeah.
Awesome. So now, when you're talking about, if your elders can use it, you mean to say that it has to be with respect to a user-friendliness, right? Like, it should
Correct.
be like a user-friendly device.
Yeah, without a doubt. So simplicity, is a core principle of architecture. Like from an academic point of view or not, as architects, we're actually supposed to create simple solutions. Creating simple solutions is a lot harder than creating complicated or complex solutions. That's easy. So part of what we've tried to do is, in the navigation of the product, make it very intuitive. The user centricity approach really helps with that, because I can, if I sort of recollect, 3 years ago, when we were the platform was only a year old, and I would be doing, different capability maturity assessments or application portfolio rationalization, and it would take me 4 and 5 clicks to get a particular process or an assessment done. Then my feedback to our developers would be, hey, this needs to be 1 click or 2 clicks, not 5 clicks. Are you still there, Akil?
Yeah. I think I lost you for a moment. It's okay. You can
Okay.
continue.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so through using the product, we've tried to make refinements to the product. So it's all been part of that process, and that's where taking that user-centric approach to development and design has sort of got it to where it is today. So yeah.
Awesome. So now, Adam, you were just mentioning a point to me where you were saying that, you're connecting with your peer networks to,
Yeah.
get them do the enterprise architect. So what are the things that you and Chris that, take out to convince them, okay, you need to use this particular solution and, this is the best? Like, what are the things that go about with that?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess, so there's probably there's a couple of reasons behind that. So our peer network, being a global one, has exposure to tools from different regions. And so if you're in the UK region, there'll be certain tools that are being used as opposed to those that are being used in North America. And again, here in Australasia, that may also differ depending on where you're at. So calling on the different network or peer networks across the globe has been really powerful, in that we've had, guys that have come from a background of using LeanIX, or guys using Orbis or Capsify or BizDesign. There's a heap of them, and some of the older programs like Mega and all of these sorts of things, traditionally they've been very, very difficult platforms to use. So getting people that have been exposed to what has been difficult, and then introducing something that is new, that is SaaS based, that is been designed around simplicity, has been refreshing to them, to say, well, actually we can do enterprise architecture without making a really complex thing, even more complex with these platforms and difficult to use. So we've really sort of lent on that peer network to get that feedback, to then update and once we've done that, we've also sort of gone back to that peer network to say, hey, listen, we've listened to you and we've taken your feedback on board. And this is what the new design looks like after your feedback. Like sort of, give them some sort of skin or ownership in the game, to say, hey, this platform. And, to be honest, we've been introduced to a lot of organizations through that process, right? Because these guys start saying, hey, like I put into this platform, this idea was my idea. This is now new and improved and more simplified and easier to use. And then, it sort of propagates itself. We've had guys that have said, hey, do you mind sharing with my friend that we don't know? This particular guy or this particular girl is really well known in the enterprise architecture space. They're architects that like using tools, and I would really like to introduce this to them because I'm really liking the experience and liking what I'm seeing. And so we've had instances there where it's almost like a little bit like viral marketing, sort of propagated out into your network and then it propagates again. So that has been a good exercise in itself. So yeah.
I just love that term, viral marketing. That's an amazing term for sure. I mean, I'm hearing it for the first time, but this kind of thing is very much effective, if we start building networks and, connections across, different domains for sure.
Yeah. So, so we've lent on that a fair bit.
If I can, ask this as a prequel, let's say, every movie has a prequel. Now, when I talk about the prequel of Colloquial Solutions, I just wanted to understand, like, what led to the inception of, the Colloquial Solutions, and on the whole end, what was the inspiration for creating that or, behind that?
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess Chris and I met working for a sort of boutique enterprise architecture firm that was based in Melbourne but was working globally. So Chris was based in our Sydney head office. I was based in our Melbourne head office, and I guess we were known as sort of young contemporary architects. So that were interested in traditional architecture, but also utilizing new approaches. So human-centered design, service design, sort of trying to mix, the good parts of the two different areas to produce, better outcomes for our customers. So while we never actually worked on a project together, we worked on, parallel projects, and from here on, we used to have, so project showcases. And so, sometimes depending how big the project was, or how small the project was, the project showcase may be the start right to the end of a project. If it was a short project, you would say, okay, we started with this problem, we ended up with this solution. This is what we did. This is why we did it. And the whole point was to educate other practitioners around the globe throughout this network that we had. So we kind of got to know each other through these project showcases. Then we started to contact each other through the network, the internal network of the organization, to say, hey, I've got this particular project to do, or I'm doing this part of a project. I'm thinking about doing it this way. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And it might be, I'm going to run a workshop and it's going to be a digital workshop. I've got stakeholders in Canberra and Brisbane, and like what is your ideas that you have. I'm thinking I'm going to run it in Miro, and I'm going to set it up like a real room in Miro, and I'm going to have deliverables all over the canvas like I was in a real room. And what are your thoughts? And we'd share ideas like that. So we became quite close through trying to collaborate with each other and work. Chris then went on to work with a financial firm in Sydney that is an international firm, and was doing that for a while. I was still consulting with this particular organisation, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, listen, I've got an opportunity to work with another group based out of Sydney. Are you interested? And I'd been at this particular organization for a while, and I thought, you know what? I think it's time to try something new, a different approach, same sort of thing, delivering enterprise architecture from a consulting point of view, but with a different organization, just to see what that was like. So we kicked that off, and at the same time, Chris had Colloquial sitting in the background, that like the very early POC version of Colloquial, right? And then a couple of weeks into us consulting together on projects out of this Sydney-based firm, he then said, okay, I'll have to come clean. I had an ulterior motive to get you to work for this organization in Sydney, and it was to get you and to show you this POC and see what your thoughts were. So he showed me the POC of Colloquial, and it was very exciting to me. I'm a very opportunistic person, so this was kind of like the first opportunity that sort of reared its head in our field, in the enterprise architecture domain. So that excited me a lot. And so before he could finish presenting it to me, I stopped him and said, right, what do you want from me? Like, am I going to be part of this thing or what? Like, because I see it as an opportunity. I want to be part of it. And he said, well, that's kind of what I was testing, is to see whether it excited you enough. So it did. So we continued consulting with this group, and we started Colloquial. We got it registered, and we did all the business things that you do. And you know, Chris was kind of doing part-time dev. You know, he's a smart guy, so he was kind of part-time deving this thing. And then we kind of had a conversation and said, man, you know, like if we want to get serious, we need to get someone who knows what they're doing. And just, it was like the universe was listening, right? So within a week or so, you know, Chris sort of contacted me on Teams and said, hey, I've got this contact. I'm going to go and meet him in the dog park in my area in Sydney, and I'm going to go have a chat to him. He's a full stack developer. He knows, like our platform is based on Ruby, which is not, as you know, it's not widely used, but there are, you know, people who do Ruby are right into Ruby. So anyway, met our business partner Steve, came back and said, man, this guy's a really good guy. Steve's from Glasgow in Scotland. Yeah, and you know, him and his wife are working in Sydney, and they're now moved to Auckland. So Steve, we've got Steve and his family in Auckland. We've got Chris and his family in Sydney, which is where our head office is, and myself in Brisbane. So, and yeah, so that's kind of how the people side of our business came together. And then, you know, we went on to sort of beef our team out. We had a couple of developers and a UI UX designer, and basically we're running a consultancy firm that was basically funding the development. So and we did that for a number of years. Consultancy sort of goes in enterprise architecture is it's like a wave. Firms go through periods where there's a lot of consulting work, and then it dives off and they want full-time employees, and the consulting work comes down, and then they find, oh, we don't have enough bodies to do the work, so consulting goes back up again. So hence the reason at the moment we're all working full-time roles, which is good from a user-centric point of view because we're all using the tool in our practice. However, it's just slowed our dev down a little bit. But, you know, we're still, we just signed up an Australian university last week. Yeah. So we've got, you know, probably a couple of handfuls of very big customers, as in, you know, we've got a couple of multi-billion-dollar companies that we're looking after. And, you know, we've got companies, you know, in Germany, we've got companies in the States, we've got companies here in Australia and New Zealand. So yeah, so it's part of the startup story, right? Is that, you know, it's not easy, but when you feel like you've got something worth fighting for, you kind of keep fighting for it. You know what I mean? So yeah,
exactly.
so that's a bit of our story. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now, I mean, you just were mentioning that, you just had, got the hands-on of different companies. So I can just say that three people based in three different locations and doing wonders. So if I have to sum
Well,
it up in
I
this
mean,
way.
I'll tell you something even funnier is that Chris and I hadn't actually physically met for about a year and a half before. So we
Oh,
had a company together, and we spoke every single day, multiple times a day for the first year and a half. And we didn't. I'd never even thought about the fact that I hadn't physically met Chris or Steve. And then it was like, okay, I think we need, you need to come down to Sydney. So I did a 3-day trip down in Sydney to do, we were doing workshops on road mapping our feature, for the future. We were doing some marketing stuff. We were doing some branding stuff. Funnily, when we first started, like we would come up with Colloquial and have a nice little icon, and we'd get it all sorted, and then one of us would go out onto the internet and find, oh, hang on, this company has an icon that's
a
nearly
similarity,
exactly
yeah.
this. Oh man, and that went on for about 6 months of just, we'd come up with something great, and we'd all be, new colors and happy
Oh,
days. But yeah, and funnily, then when I went to Sydney, I remember meeting Chris, and he was like 6'4". He's like, I'm about 6'1", so I'm fairly tall. But then Chris is like 6'4". So we're met each other online. So you don't get any understanding of how tall people
yeah,
are, right? So I went
exactly.
to meet this guy who I thought was kind of my height because we're on Teams all the time.
Yeah,
And I was like, oh man, you're so much taller than I expected. So, which was hilarious, right? And so yeah, but since then, I get down to Sydney every 3 or 4 months for a bit of a colloquial catch up. We generally will meet with some of our customers, and then we sort of do some in-house sort of planning and design stuff. So yeah, again,
that's
another part of
amazing.
the startup story, man.
Absolutely, a
Yeah,
very inspirational one. Whenever I hear
yeah,
about companies, I really love to
yeah,
know about the anecdotes and how, like,
yeah,
what went into, create that success. So that's something
yeah.
I'm always fascinated about.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? Like in another world, or in a world 20 years ago, you would never start a business with someone you'd never met. But like, and the
Yeah.
thing is, it just never even dawned on us until we actually met each other and we kind of both stopped and said to each other at the same time, This is the first time we've actually physically met." And it was like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was weird. So anyway, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Adam, like when Chris met you and, when he was giving you the idea about the company and, when you were talking about that POC, so was that, explained in the form of a presentation slide, or was it like shown, was it told verbally by him? Like what
Yeah,
was the
no,
thing on that?
yeah, yeah. Well, it was interesting because we were on a Teams call, and he kind of was coming clean with me, right? He was like, it's really good to be working with you one on one in our enterprise architecture consulting life. He said, this is kind of really working out well, because we were so similar, had very similar mindset, right? I always sort of used to describe us in our consulting life, like I'm like the sledgehammer. I have kind of big bold ideas, and I tend to try and like shock and awe, sort of approach, bold colors, bold statements to do that. Whereas, and Chris is more like the paintbrush, so I come and crash things, and Chris is, he sort of smooths them off a bit. So we work very well together.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, and so he sort of came clean to me and said, "All right, I got this other thing I want to show you." And so he basically demoed it to me. So he shared his screen and brought up Colloquial, what it was, the POC at that stage. It was an early stage prototype or POC or whatever you want to call it. And as I said to you, like I kind of maybe in 5 minutes, I kind of went, I know what this is. And I said, okay, stop. And then I said, right, let's have it. Let's have this conversation. Like, do you want me involved in this thing? Because I want to be involved. And what do you want? Like, how do I need to pay my way into this? Do I need to, like, how does this work? Because it was the first, like I come from a father who's very entrepreneurial and an uncle that's very entrepreneurial. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and being in IT, like this was like my first opportunity that jumped up and went,
Yeah,
this is an entrepreneurial project, but it's in your world. Like it's not going and starting a burger stand or something. It's not going and selling things on the internet that are not to do with what I do. This is a SaaS tool that's about enterprise architecture. Man, this is awesome. So it was, he demoed it to me. I got really excited about it because I liked the premise that was behind it, about creating a tool that was simple, creating a tool that was collaborative. These things I thought were lacking, and so we shared some common beliefs about what was needed in our part of the world, in our industry. So yeah,
that's amazing to know. Like that's good piece of information, and
yeah,
literally it gives me an inspiration and hope. And let's say to our listeners who have
yeah,
that that entrepreneurial mind, if they
yeah,
want to collaborate with someone. So this is a
yeah.
key insight which they would love to gather with. So Adam, we were just talking about the inception of colloquial solutions. Now, if I would just like to understand, like what are the key areas that colloquial solutions is currently focused on?
Yeah, cool. And like I was saying, um, as an organization, we definitely have a long wish list, or a long a roadmap of different features that we wish to deliver. And part of the, I guess, the struggle of the startup, particularly in software development, is what particular features are we going to um, dedicate our time and our resource to, because we're self-funded. We've always got to kind of weigh up how much time and resource is it going to cost to develop a particular thing. And as I was saying to you before, being product and sales, I'm very customer focused. I kind of like the shiny bells and the whistles and the things that the customer sees, which is a lot of reporting type stuff, a lot of UI based stuff. Whereas Chris and Steve have got to kind of pull me back sometimes and say, right, we need to concentrate on building. Like, we've got a library of templates and stuff, which you know people don't see as the big sexy thing, but now that it's there, I can load the platform with nothing on it, and I can say, load me a capability model, load me an application portfolio, load me these 25 assessments for applications, and I can get the platform ready very quickly, because we have a library foundation. Things like importing and exporting data, again, not like big sexy thing, but like it's kind of like a have to have. In our world, people have a bunch of spreadsheets. So when they take that leap of faith to buy your product, the first thing they do is they want to be able to load a spreadsheet and populate their applications into the platform. So being able to do that is really important. So yeah, so I guess the things we're working on right now, we're working on. So we've just redone our website, to make it more searchable from an SEO point of view. So that's been really successful. We haven't done any paid marketing or anything like that, and we've already got people from around the world finding the site a lot more, getting on and signing up for things, which is kind of what our intent was. And that started to happen organically. So that's great. That's good news. Off the back of that, you sort of got a funnel that you're feeding, you want to feed, potential customers into, right? So they find your website, a bunch of good content, and then you want them to sign up for a demo of your platform, right? That's kind of the next step. So as part of that, we have had to develop an onboarding process. So that means looking, so we've had Miro boards where we've created customer journeys of someone being onboarded into the website and then into the
Exactly.
platform. So we've
Yeah.
had to do all that sort of BA kind of work, to then map it out, so that when we get into the dev phase, you can then elicit those different requirements of each phase, but also you can do a bit of like a sanity check and say, okay, have we ticked these boxes off? So we've got the website, we've got the sign up, we can get them into the free demo. What does that mean? So like even getting the free demo meant, okay, we've got a tenant that's like a fully accessed tenant, but we don't have like a free demo tenant, and we don't, like a sandbox tenant. We realized, there's these different states that you can be even before you become a customer, right? So it's sort of, again, a bit of organic growth and things that you don't think of here. You sort of go through the process and realize, okay, we need to do that. So yeah, and then so at the moment the onboarding process is big. We're developing a bunch of wizards so that basically you can hit a little wizard's hat in the navigation, and there's a menu of different things that you can do, and you can click on a particular wizard's hat, and it will take you to a particular part of the platform and say, right, you want to load your first application, go to this part, press this, fill in the name for the application and the description. Okay, you've now got a fact card. Do you want some assessments? And so it guides you through those things. So we're working on that at the moment because we want to get it to a point of self-service. Not to say that that's we're going to be fully reliant on that. It's just going to be an avenue that a customer potentially could sign themselves up and sign on to the platform with no touch from us. That's not really how it happens. I mean, what would happen is we would contact them anyway, but that's one of the the things. But at the same time, we've got existing customers that have needs. So we're always got a list of sort of requirements or feedback coming from our customer set that are generally UI related. They're generally not big features. They're just little things. Hey, like we have a customer in Germany that are a utility over there. They all speak really great English, but they kind of said, hey, and they're a really good customer, signed up for a long time. So they kind of said, hey, it'd be really good if you guys offered German support, language support.
Yeah.
Which is, like you kind of go, yeah, sure, okay, that's not hard to do from a dev point of view. However, if you've designed a website based on English words, which are quite short, I don't know if you've ever seen German words, but German words they can be 3 or 4 words, they all put together. So it's almost like a phrase.
Yeah.
And so, we've got titles that, suddenly go off the page. So we've had to do some dev work from a UI perspective to cater, not just, it's one thing to turn German on and you have a dictionary that matches terms and says, okay, if it says this, it means this. If it says this, it's this in German. That's one thing, but then to actually make it work in the UI, which it was never designed to do in the first place, we had to do a bit of rework there. So we've got things that we've got planned, then we've got things that we try to keep our customer base happy with, and then we have the wish list, and then we go and do demos, and then a potential customer says, oh, it'd be really good if it did this. And then you kind of go, then we have to sort of stop and go, how long is that going to take? How much would that cost from a resourcing point of view? Can we do it? And will that be the thing that will get that customer to sign up? So you're constantly juggling those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Adam, if I have to, put a use case across to you, suppose let's say the customer is pretty new to technology and he has to understand, the entire thing about automation. So in that case, let's say, he says, or let's say she says, I'm having a tough time to, start and, clicking on the wizard. So in that case, can the company, help me out? So did you have a situation like that ever?
Yeah. And to be honest, that's how, I mean, like I said to you, that avenue is there. And, we will try to improve on that and get a lot of feedback for those that have sort of traversed that journey, like those that have actually done that, great, we'll get the feedback to make that as seamless as we can. And I think that's going to be something that will be ongoing for a long time, right? But our typical way of dealing with our customers is that the minute they come into that funnel and we know about it, we will be reaching out. And we've always it's been very much hand holding as much as we can, because one, we don't have that many customers that we can't, from a capacity point of view, we have the capacity to be able to look after our customers, and we kind of call them foundational customers. At this point in time, we still feel that the customer base we have are foundation sort of customers, and so we give them a lot of love. We give them a lot of love. So there's a lot of
Brilliant.
free consulting. There's a lot of nights that we're up in the middle of the night looking after people in America or the UK, or our German friends. We meet with them every second Wednesday at 7 o'clock my time, Brisbane, 8 o'clock your time. So
Exactly.
we meet with them an hour every 2 weeks. That's not something we charge for. It's a free thing. And it's all about, again, this is that user centricity stuff we were talking about at the start. Even our foundation customers, we consider to be sort of still helping us to develop this tool further. So we do a lot of hand holding. We help set up. We do a lot of actual architecture consulting, actually. So we help them develop capability models for their businesses. We help develop application reference models and tech reference models. And so we do a lot of that work. We help them, we guide them with what sort of assessments they should be looking at, in terms of, if they're doing rationalization of their products, or they're doing, cloud modernization within their organization. We try to hold their hand as much as possible. So quite a good situation if you're a customer of Colloquial at the moment. You kind of get the platform and you get a lot of free consulting as well. So yeah.
That's amazing. That's an amazing initiative. Like however, you're connecting with customers, especially with the people who are based in Europe. And yeah, I mean, it's not possible where you can connect with them every day, but every 2 weeks. I mean, every 2 weeks, that's about how it goes on. And I think, I mean, and I'm pretty sure like more customers will pour in, and a lot of, a lot of great things will come to Colloquial Solutions for sure.
Yeah. And we use Teams as well. So we use, for every customer we have, we set up a Teams channel. So that Teams channel has the people that are involved with that customer on the Colloquial side are all members of that project, as well as the customer and the people on their side. So they have access to us anytime. So we encourage them, with anything they have requests for, to put it through the Teams channel. And if we have to meet with them outside of our formal meetings, that's something we do anyway. So yeah, lots of love.
Awesome, Adam. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. Now, Adam, we have talked about Colloquial Solutions. Now, heading on to that next, next cap that you have done.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to understand, just give me an insight of your tenure of being an enterprise architect for Queensland Rail Company. I'm actually very keen to know this because, I'm a huge, I have a huge love for trains, and especially I'm a person who watches a lot of train vlogs. So I'm keen to know this.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Yeah, cool. Interesting. So as I said, like Colloquial was something that we did. We were contracting and we were funding the development of Colloquial through our contracting business. But as I was saying to you, contracting is in Australia particularly is a very it sort of goes in waves, and I wouldn't say that it's specific to seasons or financial years or anything like that. It just kind of has its own wave, and it's dependent on, it could be dependent on things like trends like AI happening, and then suddenly there's an uptake of more contract roles because businesses freak out and they want to know about AI. So, we need more architects, whatever. I'm not sure if that's how it works, but possibly. So I was sort of coming to the end of a contract phase, and sort of contracting was sort of drying up, and it was like, okay. However, there was full-time, and generally when that happens, full-time roles go up. So So there was a few roles at a few big organisations here in Queensland, of which Queensland Rail was one. I'd put my hat in the ring for a couple of different roles, and I'd got through to the end of all of them, and I sort of had a choice to make, and I decided to go with Queensland Rail for something different. I hadn't worked in government before. I'd
Oh,
worked with government. Government were my customers for 20, 30 years, but this was my first time being on the inside. So I was a bit curious about how things work. So that was a little bit of a motivating factor. Um, and naively, when I went into the rail, I really thought, oh, this is going to be boring. This is going to be, I mean, how hard can it be? It's just a train, like it's not that hard. And then I got into the rail, and I think within a day of sort of seeing how it worked, I was like, whoa, I couldn't have been any more wrong about like how complex it is to deliver a rail service, both to onboard customers as well as a freight based service, because we do both. So we have a freight side of our business, and we have the passenger side of the business, and we own the railway, right? So Queensland Rail owns the railway. We own our rolling stock. We have other entities using our railway, so other companies like Horizon and so forth, and Pacific National, and there's a few other companies that do mainly freight related businesses. No passenger. We do all passenger. But I kind of then learnt very quickly that not only do you run a railway, but you have to maintain a railway, and you have a finite resource, right? You have a finite amount of track. You have a finite amount of rolling stock. You have, like, there's all these variables, right? And so you kind of have to make the actual network itself available. You actually have to have the rolling stock that is maintained appropriately to then provide that service, right? And then you have the complexity of people on top of that. So you've got a heavily unionized workforce that is very demanding about what it will and more so what it won't do. So you'd be very surprised at how much a train driver makes in Queensland. I'll probably tell you that offline. It's quite. I might give up my job as an enterprise architect and become a train driver. Let's put it that way. So they do very well. Mind you, they have a difficult job in that it can be quite complex and stressful as a train driver. You're responsible for a lot of people. So yeah. So as an enterprise architect within the railway, it's again a very complex ecosystem. You kind of have three major stakeholders. So you've got the corporate side of the business, which is like your finance, HR, governance, risk and compliance, IT, project management. So you have our transformation. So you have that sort of corporate side of your business. You have the IT side of your business, so all your technology, and then you have the OT side of the business. And the OT side is the side that runs the train. So and again, all engineers, but just different types of engineers. So your mechanical engineers, your structural engineers, because we've got a lot of bridges, and we've got the tracks, and we've got stations, and we've got all of these physical assets, but we've got the rolling stock assets. So the asset side of our business is huge. So you're managing and then you've got the workforce as well. So it's a very big, complex problem. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Now, if I have to ask you this, Adam, like what is the technology that you're using, to do the enterprise architecture for the Queensland Rail company? Like what's in the back end?
Yeah. So what do we use to manage from an enterprise architecture, like tooling wise? At the
Tooling wise
moment,
and the technology, or let's say technology, is it like a low code, no code thing, or is it like cloud? Like what's
yeah,
the
okay.
the back
Yeah,
end thing
okay.
for that?
Yeah. And so from an EA point of view, surprisingly enough, it is Excel spreadsheets and Visio models and It's very manual at the moment, and this is part of the other complexity of being in a railway organisation anywhere in the world. Is most railways are quite old, right? So the Queensland Railway this year turned 160. So a lot of people don't realise how old, in relation to the country, how old Queensland Rail is. So it's 160 years old this year. So very legacy systems, very legacy people, legacy culture. The culture is a very old mentality, very railway mentality. So very much very strong on the OT side of the business. So, but now that data is becoming more readily available, now that we have the bandwidth to move that data, we're sort of on the precipice of utilizing IoT devices on trains, tracks, signals, in various parts of our business, to collect that data, bring it into the IT world, use the likes of Power BI and more analytical type tools, Tableau, these types of things to make sense of this, or organize this data first. So we are just in the process of putting in a new enterprise data platform in Queensland Rail. With that, there's a large quality data governance project running in unison with that enterprise data platform. With that, we're doing a lot of enterprise data modeling, understanding where our data sources reside, what applications those data sources are connected to, how they're connected to each other, what kind of state the data that we've collected so far is in. And that's varied. And some data sources are great, some data sources are terrible.
Yeah.
There's the concept of having like a master data schema for the whole organization, that we then do we then apply that to our existing data? Do we have a central repository of that we then cleanse into one source? So there's a whole bunch of stuff. And then we're a Microsoft house, so data fabrics, data bricks, all of that sort of thing. I couldn't tell you what the data architecture at the moment is. It's kind of in flight, so it's not. I can't say to you, we're running a data mesh, or we've got various data warehouses or data lakes at the moment where we've stored information. There's various ideas about whether we should have what that looks like next year will be a different kettle of fish. So now we've got lake houses and all these different concepts that are happening. I guess the thing to note is that there's a lot of work going on in that space, because we want to do things like digital twins, where we elicit data to make better decisions. And that's really what it comes down to, is being able to do things like, in the railway, we need to do what they call scheduled closures. We call them SCAS. They're called SCAS closures, which is a scheduled closure. In other words, if we need to fix part of the track, we need to shut off part of the track, but still have some availability. Like, we can't just shut off the Gold Coast, because we're fixing a bit of track on the Gold Coast and suddenly no one can get to the Gold Coast. We can't do that. So we've either got to schedule things in the middle of the night or on the weekends at night, to get the work done. And we can only do packets of work that we can do within a fixed time frame. We can't just shut it down for a week, because then passengers suddenly can't get to and from work. There's big impacts, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that in play. So yeah, so we're environment wise, we're a Microsoft house, we're an SAP house. We've got a lot of SAP products. There is currently a big transformation project around the SAP upgrade from ECC to S/4HANA. So there was a lot of work in that space, but we have a mix of a lot of SAP modules both in finance and in HR. We use success factors in HR, in recruiting, and whatever else. We use SAP Ariba. We use a lot of SAP products. So yeah, very much Microsoft, very much SAP, and then a host of different bespoke products that we use in simulation. So we do quite a lot of simulation work for train planning. So one of the things that's really important in the railways is planning. And the day of operations that you see today would have been planned years before. So we plan years ahead, and then as it gets closer, those years become the yearly, then they become 3 monthly, then they become monthly, and then 2 weekly, and then day of operations, I think,
Exactly.
it's a 3-day plan. So
Oh,
if something goes wrong in that day of ops, then you've got to so we have a whole area of disruption management that deals with that. So it's all about uptime and on time and all of that sort of stuff. So very complex.
oh my God, that's a complex workflow for sure, I can say. But I
Yeah.
mean, when we are talking about the technologies that you were mentioning about, there's a
Yeah.
plethora of opportunities, and let's say a plethora of skills that people can learn from and understand with.
Oh,
So
without a doubt.
that's pretty much awesome, Adam.
Yeah.
Now, awesome. So, Adam, now if we have to talk about the success stories, or if you would like to share the success stories with me and my listeners, like what would
Yeah.
you name with respect to the Colloquial Solutions and the Queensland Rail Company?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think the success stories, or the success story of Colloquial is something that we're getting a lot of feedback from existing customers now and potential future customers, is the fact that we've created something that is simple to use, that is actually helping to operationalize architecture very quickly. This is something that is different to other tools in the space. Other tools that we're competing with require a lot of setup time, a lot of manual upkeep along the way, and are very complex to use. So one of the things that that probably the biggest, as I say, the biggest success story that's coming out is the feedback that we're getting from either peer groups or our customer groups, or even myself, to be honest, in using. I've been using it at Queensland Rail for various projects, and yeah, it's how fast you can stand a tenant up in Colloquial with real live data and start to get real live insight from very, very quickly. The other side is the how quickly you can customize or take a template and make it your own. It has, again, we're getting a lot of feedback because a lot of other organizations, they don't want to let you touch anything. And if you want something different, you have to request it, and then they'll charge you money for that. We're not interested in that kind of model. We're kind of more interested in giving something that you can customize. Hence the reason Colloquial. Colloquial is about, the name itself is about, like a colloquial or a colloquialism is, you might refer to a particular thing as ABC product. I might refer to it as AB and AB Co or something. I can name it what I want. You can name it what you want, as long
Exactly.
as your organization refers to
Yeah.
it. And that's kind of the Colloquial play, is about making it very specific to your organization as opposed to mine. Um, so that's probably the big stuff in the Colloquial space is really that, and the fact that there's nothing better than, and probably one anecdote I can pull from a Colloquial side is, I was in a town hall for a multinational telecommunication company that uses Colloquial, and I basically was there as a fly on the wall, as someone just watching, and the group CIO was presenting to, like, all of IT, but also these CIOs that were underneath. He was the head CIO, and then he had all these group CIOs around the world, and he was using Colloquial to tell the story. And
Wow.
And in the middle of it, there was a new CIO, and she was a North American CIO, and she kind of said, can I just stop you for 1 second? What's this platform we're using? I haven't seen it before, but it's really, really easy, and really easy to understand what you're talking about, and it's really clear, and it was like the best advertisement that you could ever get for a product, right? And
Absolutely.
it was like being, I've got two daughters. It was like a proud dad moment, like I was kind of sitting there, and this group CIO said, "Oh, it's a product that we use called Colloquial," and actually I've got Chris and Adam on the call listening right now. Say hello, guys, and we're like, "Oh, how you doing?" And this lady from North America turned around and said, "Hey guys, this is great. Like this is what we need, is stuff that's easy to use and also is easy to understand." So that was a very big success story. On the Queensland Rail side, as I said, I've been doing a lot of work since I started there, specifically with capability-based planning. And this is something, while it's not, I wouldn't say it's new to Queensland Rail. I think in the past, consultants have brought it in and out of the organisation, but it's never something that they've had as an internal capability. And so this is something that I've been, sometimes, and as architects, speaking to maybe people that want to be architects in the future, right, is that sometimes architects are seen as almost like witches or wizards, like a lot of times people don't understand the magic that that we might perform sometimes. And so in your travels as an architect, you may come across project managers or whatever that say, what do these enterprise architects do? What value do they bring? So what I would say to them is, capability-based planning is a really good tool for enterprise architects to have in their toolbox, because what it enables you to do is to run a project of various size. I would never try to do the whole organization at once. It would take you too long, but you can go into a particular area and do a maturity assessment based on capability. And what it will give you is the current state and the target state of that particular function. And what it will do is it will help you look at the world from a people, process, information, and technology standpoint. And you create a heat map that allows you to then put your finger on areas of problems that you can then create roadmaps from and say, in this particular area, we need to look at a new particular system, or we've got manual process there that we want to automate with Power Automate, or we've got, it allows you to elicit opportunity. So I definitely think one of the big success stories that I've had in the bit over a year of QR or Queensland Rail has been introducing capability-based planning internally as a capability. So yeah.
That's pretty much interesting, especially, when you were talking about that North American lady who was just,
Yeah.
heaping praise towards the colloquial solutions. I totally understand, especially when you were telling that I was completely in awe. Like my reaction was this. I'm pretty sure your reaction was like, oh my God, this is like an award, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, what's nice is, and again, I think Chris would also agree with this, is when you're demoing whatever SaaS tool, say you've got a startup, and whatever SaaS tool you've got, when you're trying to sell the tool, not that it's hard, but it's always harder than if you can get your customers' data into your tool, and instead of critiquing the tool, you start critiquing the organization's data. So then the conversation changes from being about the tool to being about the state of the organization, which is what the intent of the tool is, right? So it's
Exactly.
very hard. It's very hard. It's really hard from a startup standpoint when you're selling or demoing a tool that has data that the customer cannot relate to. You say, "Oh, I've got this pretend company, and it's this ABC Co, and it's an insurance company, and you make up this world, right?" But if the person you're selling to is a travel company, or if they're from an oil and gas company, or if they're from a railway company, and you've got an insurance example, it's not very relatable, right? There's nothing better than when you can do that sort of, like you can get their data. Like if you say, okay, let's do a little like a month trial or something, and then let's do a demo off the back of that. So you get their data in there, and you say, okay, now that we've got your data, look what's happening here. Like you guys have got low maturity here. You've got a bunch of applications in this space that you're containing because they've end of life or end of support. Like, what are you going to do about that? And so then it's more about what their actual organizational needs are. And then what they do is they go, oh, the tool did a really good job of putting the food on the plate, because the tool is just the plate. Like the data is the food you put on the plate.
Yeah.
And how you consume that and how it's presented is what the platform does. It says, okay, I've got these applications and I'm allowing you to assess these applications and heat map these applications, so that when you look at your portfolio, I can show you the life cycle of your applications, and you can start to see, oh, in this area, financial management systems, I've got one core system, but I've got these 3 that are being contained, and I've got one that's being retired. Have I got a replacement for that? And how long is how long before this is end of life? And then you can have other lenses that you say, well, oh, you want to know end of life? Yeah, we collected that information. Click, turn on end of life, and suddenly the heat map is about end of life. Oh, the end of life is in 6 months. Did you know that? Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And we help. That's part of what we're trying to visualize and help them understand. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's
You
cool.
should not
That's always
blame the
good.
Absolutely, Adam. So as you were suggesting, especially like when you're talking about the data point, I myself am a data scientist, an aspiring data scientist right now. So for us, the major thing that we deal with is data. If the data is good, okay, everything is perfect. If the data is not good, okay, we are here. We will transform the data. We'll clean the data. We'll get the best data that you require. So
Well, you're in the right job at the moment. I think you'll have a job for a long time, because I think the world is starting to understand that the number one area for all organisations. I was only saying this morning to my boss at Queensland Rail, was and he's the head of data and automation as well as architecture. And so I said to him, I said, hey, listen, to me, in my opinion, having a view across the whole organisation, the number one area is data. Right, we need to make sure that our data is in a great state, so that, because garbage in, garbage out. Like if the data's garbage, you're not going to get anything good from it. But if you've got good quality data, then you've got something to work with. So
exactly.
Akil, you've chosen a very good profession.
Thank you so much, Adam. So I was very passionate about it from the start, and since a long time, and yeah, and I'm really happy
Yeah.
that I've landed up in a great university like Deakin. So
Yes.
that's
Yes. Yeah, Deakin is one of my old customers. So Deakin is a very good university,
oh,
and as you say, besides your podcast hosting career, your data science career will also be good. I think you'll do well in both.
oh, that really means a lot, Adam. That
Yeah,
really means a lot for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. So now, Adam, now you give me complete inspiration when I'm going to ask you this. So I just wanted to understand, like, how are you able to juggle between the roles of, let's say, being the enterprise architect and the business analyst at Queensland Rail, to that of, being a co-founder of Colloquial Solutions and also being the director of product and sales. Like, how are you able to do that?
yeah. I would like to say that I that I have a formula to doing that, but I guess the one thing I do is I have specific blocks of time that I dedicate to each of these things. Queensland Rail is my primary job, and at the moment, I have an agreement with them as a full-time employee. So from an ethical, moral standpoint, I give them, I guess, the first right of refusal. Like they're my primary, concern. because I have I guess because of the agreement that I have with them. Outside of that, my next concern is obviously Colloquial Solutions. So, and I think I mentioned to you before, I have 2 young children as well. So, I got to kind of play the dad role as well. So, in the morning till my kids go to school, I kind of play dad, and then when my kids get home, sort of 4 or 5 o'clock till they go to sleep at 8 o'clock. I got to play, go and do homework and do all those things, play guitars and do that sort of thing with them. And that's probably my primary role. Then, Queensland Rail, and I think I've spoken to you about this before, working in government, there's quite a lot of meetings during the day. So unfortunately, as an architect, you got to produce, deliverables and reports and different artifacts. So I find myself doing that at night quite a lot. So I do a lot of night work, and unfortunately, that's the nature of the business. I mean, you are paid well for what you do, so you kind of have to do a little bit of that sometimes. So I spend a little bit of time at night, and then the other times is when I do colloquial work. So colloquial work generally is night and weekends for me. Not very often, but every now and then, if I may have a demo that happens during the week, I will definitely try to do it, so that it, like it always fits into my, QR timetable first. So a lot of juggling, not a lot of sleep. I think my health app was telling me my average sleep for the last 3 months is 4 hours and 59 minutes. So that's not great, and I certainly am not encouraging anyone to do that. But it's like anything. Like I signed up for it. I certainly don't complain about it. Like I'm one of these people. I'd much rather be busy than not. So some days I'm too busy. Some days I have a bit of time. So yeah, I think it's my goal is that Colloquial is my full-time job, and that I maybe won't be working in Queensland Rail one day, and that I would be full-time, maybe traveling the world selling Colloquial, maybe in the North America or Europe, or doing that. So that is the plan. It's just we're working towards that, and it's at the moment it's slowly, but hopefully one day all 3 of us are fully dedicated to Colloquial only, and then we bring on salespeople and marketing people and build out our dev team again, and sort of get it to a point where maybe one day we sell it, or who knows. So yeah, but it's it's a bit of a labor of love, you know what I mean? Like it's a little bit it's a bit like that. I don't mind doing it. Like I quite enjoy it. And I've actually recently got my GitHub going again, and am starting to do a little bit of JavaScript myself. So, which is a little bit dangerous, but I'm forever getting told by Chris and Steve what I do wrong. But I'm doing a little bit of dev as well. So yeah, which is fun.
I mean, absolutely. Upskilling yourself, I mean, that's
Yeah.
not at all wrong, because you're
Yeah.
trying to, add a new version to yourself. As we just say, right, systems always have a new version. If we upskill ourselves, we are actually
Yeah.
creating a new version of ourselves and being the best. So
Totally agree. Totally agree.
now, before we, conclude our podcast episode and
Yeah.
go towards the rapid fire, which is like to a,
Yeah.
a cooler route, or let's say to a
Yeah.
relaxing kind of a route,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to understand in depth, and if you can, mention me about the certifications that you have been
Yeah.
awarded in your entire IT journey,
Yeah.
Adam.
Yeah. And yeah, there's quite a few, and they're fairly well known ones. So within, if it's enterprise architecture that you aspire to sort of get into, then TOGAF is probably the most well-known enterprise architecture framework. So that's TOGAF is the Open Groups enterprise architecture framework, and I don't know what the percentage is worldwide, but it's probably every job that you would look at in Australia or in the UK or the US, they will have a requirement to have TOGAF certification. A TOGAF can be something that you do like a 5-day course, or you can do self-taught and then do the exams. You pay to go and do the exams, and it's I don't know, I think it's like a 75 or 80% pass rate. And again, it's not like it's not super difficult, but it's one of those things. If you study the course, you'll be fine. The other area that has sort of come into the architecture world in the last couple of years is scaled agile. So it's really just teaching a delivery process. So it's just saying, traditionally we do architecture this way. If you're working on an agile project, and I think I've told you my definition of that before. So if you're working on known projects, you probably don't need to do things agile. But if you are working on unknown projects, like for in the colloquial space, we do take an agile approach to how we develop and design, because we feel that this is you kind of take small steps fast, learn fast. If you're going down the wrong way, stop, pivot, go another way. This is what agile will give you. But in my consulting life, delivering projects that I delivered 10 times before, there's probably no need for scaled agile. Like you can deliver based on a traditional waterfall approach, where you have a staged project delivery, which is fine. It's just and that's something either you'll get with experience, or something that you'll learn along the way. I've done in my business life, in my IT life, I've done project management certification. So I did PMBOK. Some organisations, like in Queensland government, they're big on Prince 2. But for me, I did the project manager's book of knowledge. In my business analyst, pre-becoming an enterprise architect, I studied the BABOK, which is the business analyst book of knowledge. For any budding analyst, to be fair, I think any project manager, any enterprise architect, anyone working in the IT space should all do the BABOK. Everyone should have business analysis skills. Everyone should understand what requirements are. Everyone should be able to gather and elicit requirements as a bare minimum, in my opinion, right? Like I think, and if you're doing a degree that has industry certifications, and BABOK is one, I would do that, right? The other things that I've come across in my time, so one called COBIT or COBIT, depending who you're talking to, that's from a group called ISACA. That's a really good framework for aligning business with IT. And if you're going into the consulting world, a lot of the work you do is all about that. Does our IT practice align to our corporate strategy or our business, right? And you'll be surprised how many IT organizations are not, that are just reactive service ticket takers. That's all they just react to problems, whereas you can change the narrative there. And there's another search you can do, which is called IT for IT, which is based around that alignment as well. So COBIT and IT for IT are very good about setting up IT practices to be aligned with business and be proactive in doing so. And then, the old classic service management, IT or ITSM, ITIL is again a very good one if you're sort of getting into that side of IT, which is the service management support side. ITIL is a bit of a must. On top of that, I have an IT degree. I have a master's in enterprise architecture, and I've got a couple of other business degrees that I haven't finished, but I've gone down the roads of MBAs and all that sort of stuff. And I think any IT person or IT professional is signing up for a life of learning, right? So like part of what we do is, we're constantly learning. So when I do find gaps of time, which is not often, but sometimes it happens, I try my hand a little bit with Python and JavaScript, because I think they're good problem solving tools. I'm trying to teach my kids to learn coding as well, coding for kids, so they're doing a bit of that. And you could be in an organization like Queensland Rail that offer LinkedIn learning, and that's like, there's some really good modules on LinkedIn learning for everything you can think of, from programming to enterprise architecture, data related stuff, data science related stuff. LinkedIn learning, I don't know how many courses they have, but they have a huge bank of really good content. So yeah, I think the point of it is that you'll do a lot of learning in your IT life, and you will continue to learn. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So now, when you're talking about Babok, and you were just saying that every person who's belonging to the IT space should learn that.
yeah.
So, having said that, do you recommend that to me as well?
Everyone. The reason I say that is that every project that you do, whether it's a data science related project, whether it's an EA project, whether it's infrastructure related, integration, anything, right? Everything is about a customer need, and understanding that customer need. So one, there's a whole thing around problem definition, understanding what the actual problem is, right? And then the other side of it is understanding what the requirements of your customer is, so and you'd be surprised how poorly that is done. And often projects are delivered to customers and have totally missed the mark. I can't remember. I saw years ago, and it might have been when I was studying in university, but like the failure rate of IT projects is like 80%. The failure rate, and a lot of that has got to do with the fact that we don't do the front end well. We tend to think we know what the customer wants, and that's couldn't be further from the truth.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
traditionally a developer as a person is a very different person to a business. Someone working in the travel part of the business, or someone working in like, very different people. But it's really important to understand your customer and what your customer wants, and to constantly, and this is where Agile is very good, is to constantly showcase to your customer before you get to the end. You want to have showcased to them multiple times, hey, this is what you said you want, this is what we've done. This is what you said you want, this is what we've done. This is what you said you want, this is what we've done, before you get to the final presentation, right? Because then you find out very quickly, oh, hang on, no, the customer doesn't want that, they want this. Oh, okay, sorry, customer, I didn't quite understand. We don't want that. We want to, at the front end, we want to be very clear with the customer and understand. And that's big about listening, right? There's
Absolutely.
asking the right questions, and then sitting back and listening
Yeah.
to what the customer needs. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So yeah, Adam, completely, as when you're doing a project and you're, trying to, you're having your customer in part of that, integrated with that, you need to understand what your customers need is, rather than, what you can do. I mean, it has to
Correct.
be like, what the customer wants and how you can help him, guide through that.
Correct. Correct. Because you know, a lot of times technologists, and we're talking about in the development space, say, oh, I learned this really cool thing, and I really want to do this really cool thing that I know. I'm going to put this cool thing in, and the customer's going to they're just going to say, wow, what a cool thing. And then, you then showcase the customer, and the customer says, hey, what's this thing, man? I never asked for this thing. I don't want this thing. And then you suddenly, the developer's like, oh my God, like, so this is kind of where, and it's a lot of what we do in the colloquial space, right? Is really try to stop yourself from solutioning for the end customer, and really putting the time into actually engaging with that customer where you can, and saying, hey, what do you want? Like, I'm not going to tell you what you want, you tell me what you want, right? And then I will try to deliver what you want. And when I've got something, I will come and test it with you. Hey, customer, you said this, I've done this, what do you think? And the customer says, no, that's not what I meant this. And you say, right, and luckily I've got no hair to pull out, so that's okay. But and sometimes it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, you kind of got to ask yourself, why are you here again? Like, you're not here just to do what you want, right? Right? Wouldn't that be awesome? We all just get paid to do stuff we want to do. Doesn't happen that way, right?
Not
So
at all.
that's why we need to be really clear at the front end. And you'd be surprised, like Queensland Rail is a really good example of it, where in our delivery process is really done badly, right? And you try to fix the process and fix the problem, and sometimes there'll be a big boss somewhere that says, you don't touch that, you leave that alone, and you say, but it's broken. And it's so it can be very difficult. And the reason why IT consultants still have a lot of work is because there's still a lot of broken stuff, right?
Yeah,
Nothing's perfect, but if you've got a career like in data science, like you will have a customer that will want a report, or you'll have a customer that wants data presented in a particular way for a particular reason. The
absolutely.
the best thing you can do, besides the skills that you have in doing all the magic that you do within a database, right? The best thing that you can do is spend a lot of time and be very good at understanding the problem domain and eliciting the requirements of that customer. And if you can do that really well, and then you can use your data science magic to do and produce what you've been asked for, you'll be a rock star. People will love you.
That's a beautiful tip,
Yeah,
Adam. For sure, I think I'm gonna look back. I'm gonna go
yeah,
back to this interview for sure. I'm gonna
yeah,
again make a note of this point, and definitely I'm gonna utilize it in my
yeah,
tenure throughout for
yeah.
sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. You just
So
remember
Adam,
me when
yeah,
you're a big data science guru, all right? Yeah? Don't forget
absolutely. I
us.
will always remember you, Adam, for sure, man. There's no worries
Cool.
on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, Adam, now we were all talking about technical stuff, everything, about your
Mm.
journey. Now let's take a lighter route. Now let's go
Yes.
towards the rapid fire round. So,
Yes.
so Adam, I'm pretty much aware of the fact that you're a huge Collingwood fan. Now, if I would
Yeah.
like to ask you, who is your favorite Collingwood player of all time? Who would it be?
Oh, I'd probably say Nathan Buckley, who he was a coach of Collingwood recently. He's in the media now, but yeah, he was and probably because of my age, he was a Collingwood captain, and he was a very good player. And not very much liked by other teams, but yeah, as a Collingwood person, yeah, Nathan Buckley is probably my favourite player for sure. Yeah,
Awesome. Now, Adam, like in our previous conversations, I came to know that you have a Gujarati best friend, like a Guju best friend.
yeah, good, yeah.
So, yeah, like what's your favorite Gujarati food that you have tried?
Probably, and because I've only eaten a couple of times with him. Um, so the gulab jamun.
Okay,
Yeah, I like gulab jamun, the dessert, the sweet dough dessert. His wife makes very, very good gulab jamun.
okay,
I got to go when I lived in Melbourne. I got to go to Camberwell, to the Five Ways there, and there was an Indian restaurant there called, I think it was called the Tandoori Hut or Tandoori Hut. It's like sort of up Hawthorne Way. Anyway, I was there, and his mother was over from India, and I know Gujarati is quite strict, so
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
his mum didn't was very quiet, and he said to me, listen, you don't worry too much about my mum. I know you want to say hello and be polite, but it's kind of not how we do things. So just, you can say hello, she'll say hello, but just she'll be very quiet. It's not because she doesn't like you. It's just it's how it is. Anyway, we went there, and obviously, being Guju, and he's a very strict Gujarati, so only eat very, like very, very strict vegetarians.
Yeah.
And so, and like I didn't, it doesn't worry. And he was so worried that I, wasn't eating meat or stuff. And I was like, man, I like, one meal you think is going to kill me? Like I could go weeks without meat. It doesn't worry me. But what blew me away was we ate these beautiful curries, man, that were like tomato-based curries and stuff that I hadn't been exposed. Like I grew up with a very Southeast Asian life. I have a lot of Indian uncles from Singapore and stuff. So I grew up with Uncle Jaya and some Indian
Okay.
uncles. Asian. We call your father's friends you call uncle and auntie and all this
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah,
stuff. So I
yeah.
grew up like that, even though I'm this big Aussie guy. I grew up with a very Southeast Asian life because my dad and my uncle lived in Singapore. So I grew up eating traditional Indian food, from my uncles and stuff. So that wasn't foreign to me, but I hadn't been exposed to so much vegetarian Gujarati, and it was great. It was really, really good. But gulab jamun is probably and to be honest, I love all the Indian breads and stuff as well, which is, probably a bit, naughty in that. But I love chapatis, I love puri, I love naan, any kind of Indian breads. I love all the raita. I love buja. I love the buja mix. So I've had it. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of exposure to Indian food. So, and I can eat very hot food as well. So I've had a lot of exposure to eating chili and all this. So my wife is Vietnamese, so we eat,
I know.
bird's eye chili, and
Oh my God. I tried that and I had a very, very, I mean, bad experience, especially with the,
oh,
spice. I don't eat
but
chilies at all. That was the time I ate, and I'm like,
yeah.
oh God, I need some water.
Oh, my wife can just eat. She just can bite the bird's eye chili just raw.
Oh
I don't
my.
like, yeah, crazy, crazy. So, but yeah, no, it was. So I've luckily to have enjoyed some good Jew food. Yeah.
That's really good. Now, Adam, if I would like to ask you, like, what's your favorite go-to destination of, traveling?
Yeah. Again, because my wife's Vietnamese, we do go to Vietnam a lot. And that's always a good, I don't know. And we lived over there for a year before COVID, so that was awesome. Probably my favorite city to go to so far. I love Bangkok. So my family, my dad's got an apartment in Bangkok, so we spend a little bit of time there. And he lives in Vietnam, so I spend a fair bit of time in Southeast Asia. I used to spend a lot of time in Singapore. My uncle lived there, but he's since passed, and so now going back to Singapore is a little bit sad. But probably for excitement and food and like just awesomeness, I do love Bangkok. Bangkok is a really, really cool city. So yeah, in Asia. But then, like if I was in Europe, London is pretty awesome. Again, you got heaps of curry houses and stuff, but obviously it's English curry, so it's a westernized sort of experience.
Westernized
But
curry.
yeah, so it's different, but it's still cool. Like beer and curry in on a cold London night is pretty awesome. And then,
Yeah.
but on my bucket list is probably New York and Chicago and a few of those places I'd like to see in North America. I've worked in America, but in the South, in Texas, and a little bit in California as an
Oh,
enterprise architect. Yeah.
nice. I mean, you just have a great exposure to, towards the different parts of the world, and that's
Yeah.
pretty awesome to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. 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 No,
Perfect.
cool.
Suppose, Adam, I fly over to Brisbane. So what is the go-to place that you would suggest me in
In
Brisbane?
Brisbane.
Yeah.
And what sort of place? What like a
Any go-to place, like, for
oh,
traveling around.
go-to place? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I guess Brisbane's kind of like the little brother of Sydney and Melbourne, right? Like it's probably population-wise is probably half the size, of those cities. Brisbane's really surprisingly, Brisbane's very good coffee place. Melbourne and Sydney get the big rap about being the coffee places. I would say Brisbane's coffee game is as good as Melbourne, maybe in some places better. In some places, like it's at least on par with Melbourne. Brisbane has a very good breakfast scene because you got to remember Brisbane weather is really awesome. So we don't have a lot of cold up here. So you kind of have the opportunity to do breakfast. So Brisbane is a very, very good breakfast coffee destination, and is becoming, I guess, more mature as a city. I wouldn't say, it's on par with Sydney and Melbourne in sheer, like you just got that sheer size and the variety of things. Brisbane's just a smaller version of a Brisbane and a Melbourne, sorry, and a Sydney and Melbourne. So you've got areas of Brisbane that are, big Indian community. So, in Brisbane, Cooper's Plains and sort of southern parts of Brisbane are very, very Indian, so if you want Indian spices, you want to go to good Indian restaurants, you would go to a particular area. In the same vein, my wife being Vietnamese, so when we're in Melbourne, we lived in North Richmond, which is a Viet area. But we would go to Springvale and Footscray and like go to all the other Viet areas, to do shopping or to go to restaurants. In Brisbane, we have one area, Inala. That's the big Vietnamese area. It's kind of like a mini Springvale. But that's what we miss about Melbourne, right? Is that we could like go to different, like Melbourne's got 5 or 6 different Viet areas, you know what I mean? Whereas Brisbane's got one. So, but Brisbane's weather is amazing. Brisbane's a beautiful, very, very beautiful city. So, like getting on the ferry and going down the river. Brisbane's a very picturesque place. And, so it's an outdoor place. Like if you go to restaurants, it's very outdoor. Soaking up the city and what it offers. So yeah. So al fresco, it's very, very sort of open and out there, Brisbane, And then you've obviously got the Gold Coast and Noosa and these places on the doorstep. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So for sure, I think that's going to be in my wish list for sure. Someday I would
it's a
love
good
to
place to
visit it.
travel. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Now, a final question to you, Adam. Like, who's your favorite cricketer of all time?
See, that do it. I feel like do I favorite Australian cricketer? So can I have two? Like, because I'll say my favorite Australian cricketer and then my favorite rest of the world cricketer.
Absolutely.
So I grew up in the era of the Benson and Hedges World Series, right? So it shows you how old I am. And so for me, my favorite Australian cricketer would have been Alan Border. So Australian cricket captain, awesome batter. It was like he played slips. He played very sort of close in. So he was just a tough guy, and a good all round captain. But like there's quite a few. I mean, there's quite a few Australian cricketers there that are in that era that I probably would choose as well. Like Adam Gilchrist was a favourite as well. But my favourite, probably non-Australian, would have been Viv Richards. So they used to call him the Master Blaster. And so West Indies batsman, beard, never wore a helmet, just wore his cap. And I used to have his bat. I used to, and he would always chew gum. And he'd always like sit. He'd always look really cool because he would kind of sit on the end of his bat, like, and just he kind of just had a presence about him, and he was a very strong batter. So Viv Richards was probably my favourite non-Australian. But then like I certainly can appreciate the Tendulkars of this world, and it was funny. I was in a taxi cab in Melbourne. And I was the guy after Tendulkar had got out. So that the guy, I'd got into this taxi, and the taxi guy had picked me up at the airport, and I was coming in, and he said, "Oh, you'll never guess who I had in the taxi before you." And I said, "Oh, and he said, I was talking to this guy, and I was talking about the cricket, and I was talking to this guy, and he said I was dropping him off at the Crown Casino, where they were staying at one of the big hotels in the city. And he said he was with his wife, and he talked to him the whole time. And there was something about Tendulkar going on, not controversial, but there was just, and this guy was talking to him saying, "Oh, are you here for the cricket?" He just thought he was some dude coming to watch the cricket, And then when the guy got out of the car and went to get his bags and stuff, the guy said, apparently Tendulkar shook his hand and said, "It's nice to meet you. I'm the guy you're talking about. I'm Sachin Tendulkar."
Oh my God.
And this guy was, as an Aussie guy, right? Like he was in awe, but it wouldn't be like an Indian. I mean, an Indian would know who he was, right? An Indian taxi driver would be like on the ground, like, "Sachin, I love you." You know what I mean? Like, and I don't blame, because the guy's, like one of the best of all time. But yeah, so he came to the airport and picked me up, and he said, "Oh, you wouldn't guess who was sitting in the seat you're sitting in before. And I was like, okay, who? And he's like, yeah, Sachin. And I was like, what? Really? Holy crap. So, I was like, oh man, wait till I tell my Gucci mate that. The first thing I did when I got out of the thing was ring my mate Nilesh and say, hey, I was just in the car Sachin was in. So, so yeah, pretty impressive. But yeah, they would be my two probably favorite cricketers. So yeah,
Awesome.
there you go.
I mean, that's an amazing anecdote, I mean,
Ah,
probably, that's going to go like the best one that I've heard for sure.
well, yeah, it wasn't like I actually met the guy, but I met I was at a function at the Gabba in Brisbane, and a friend of mine was working. I'm trying to think who he was working for, but I got taken along as a guest. And Glenn McGrath was talking, and so we got to meet Glenn McGrath, but I got to meet Michael Clark, and they had a raffle for a bat, and a signed bat, and I won it, and so I got a Michael Clark sign, like he signed it for me, and then I kept it with me for a long time. And then my Guju mate had a son called Havis, and I don't know how old Havis was, but it was 3 or 4 years old. I gave him that bat for his birthday. I said, because I said to my Guju mate is mad about cricket. He plays cricket. He's mad about it. And I just said to him, I said, man, to me this is, it's cool, but it's, like I don't, it's not changing my world, but like if it would be a nice present for your son, I'd be happy for him to have it, and he still has it to this day. So yeah, so that was pretty cool as well. Yeah,
Awesome, Adam.
yeah, yeah,
So, Adam, thank you so much for, making time and, being part of my
yeah,
podcast initiative.
yeah. No problem, no problem.
Honestly, I just had a great time, conversing with you, especially, going through your journey. I
Yeah,
mean,
likewise.
understanding your insights about enterprise architecture. Especially the thing that I was completely blown about was like, the inception
Yeah,
that led to Colloquial Solutions and how that was formed. Your rapport with with your partner, Mr.
yeah,
Chris. If I
yeah,
ever get a chance to, do a podcast with him, I would
yeah,
love to do that as well.
yeah, yeah,
And along with that, the insights that you gave about the difference between Colloquial Solutions and to that of Queensland Rail, that was completely impressive. And along with that, the certifications that you have talked about in depth. So these are some
yeah.
things that are amazing to know and awesome to know. So on that
Yeah,
note,
cool.
thank you once again,
Yeah,
Adam, for taking time and being part of
no,
this podcast episode.
yeah,
Thank you so
no. I
much.
I appreciate it, and if you ever need anything, by all means, reach out, and happy to help. Yeah,
Awesome. So, listeners, before we conclude our podcast episode, this is an open request to all the industry leaders out there who are hearing to my podcast. If you have any interesting insight or any key, useful, interesting journey that you would like to share through my podcast episode, you could reach out to me at my email ID, akhil.navluri55@gmail.com, or you could message me on my WhatsApp number that's present on the profile page of my podcast channel. Or simple, you could just go to the Instagram page of my Instagram handle and directly DM me there, and I would get back to you as soon as possible. And who knows, it's going to be you next time, the next industry leader that I would be collaborating with. So, on this note, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off from Melbourne. So, till then, keep listening, take care, goodbye, stay tuned, au revoir. Thank you, good day. Yeah.